Hello and good evening. I'm Melisa Idris. Welcome to Consider This. This is the show where we want you to consider and then reconsider what you know of the news of the day. Putrajaya is set to roll back RON 95 subsidies by mid of next year. Now, according to statements in Parliament, eligibility will depend on factors like household size and income and car ownership, as well as being tied to localized data from the Basic Expenditure for a Decent Living and Cost of Living Index. Now, how should policymakers manage the complexities of categorisation of this subsidy reform? Well, let's speak to Dr. Ahmad Razman Abdul Latiff, who is the Director of Coursework Programmes at Putra Business School. Dr. Razman, thank you so much for being on the show with me today. I'm just wondering, what are your main concerns about the rollout or the implementation of the rationalisation of RON 95 subsidies?
Yes, thank you, Melisa. My main concerns probably in ensuring that everyone who deserves to continue getting the subsidy will receive it, and those who are not qualified to receive it do not receive it. And this is related to the issue whether the data collected by the government is comprehensive enough and complete enough, where no one is left out from the system. And another concern of mine is the implementation of the disbursement of a subsidy itself, whether using the MyCard or e-wallet, as we can see from past experience, and they're bound to be hiccups each time we introduce a new mechanism. And the main issue or the main point here is whether we have any mitigation controls to ensure such hiccup won't happen, or if it does happen, the intervention process for it. So I see that communication, public awareness, system readiness, these are all the vital parts of the whole process for this subsidy rationalization.
Okay, well, that's interesting. Let's break it down according to the categories that you mentioned. Let's talk about first the need for comprehensive, accurate data. So when we think about the challenges in trying to verify things like, car ownership and household income, household size, employment status, especially when you think about those who have fluctuating incomes, gig workers, I'm thinking, people who are working, are informal workers. How do you see the government making sure that they don't fall through the cracks, that the data is in fact accurate so that the subsidy framework can be implemented accurately?
Yes, of course, this is going to be a huge challenge to the government because we are talking about probably 8 to 9 millions of your users across the country compared to the previous diesel rationalization. But another issue, like what you mentioned, is that this data is alive, meaning that they're bound to be changes to the individual's income, moving location. So in reality, this is bound to cause the system not to be that accurate because it requires a real-time updating of data, and something that we know that the main population will not be able to fulfill this kind of commitment. And that's why if you notice, when PADU was introduced and when the time frame was given to the public, again, only half of the adult managed to fill up, and this is to register. We are not talking about updating the data itself. So I foresee that this is bound to be a main issue, how you can ensure that those who deserve it able to receive the subsidy. And there are going to be some leakages, meaning there will be some complaints, some concerns. But the one way to address this is to prepare for such eventualities and not being caught up by this situation where the government unable to rectify the situation as quickly as possible, or unable to give a satisfactory answer to those who raise some concerns.
Ah, that's interesting. So there's bound to be some exclusion error whenever there are subsidy reform. But what you're saying is that the government needs to be quick in addressing any type of error. Is that accurate? Okay. All right. When we look at the disbursements of subsidies that you mentioned, one of the categories that you're concerned about, what do you think might work best for Malaysia? Thinking through the pros and cons, you mentioned IC or e-wallets. How do we think through how best to implement if it does turn out to be a two-tier pricing system for RON 95? What might work best in your opinion?
Of course, we do not want to introduce totally new and unfamiliar system or process to the public. So that's why when the government said, let's use the existing platform or mechanism like IC, like my card. And also, if you notice in the past budget, I think budget 2023, when the government disbursed cash incentive to the population, especially the adult, via e-wallet, this is actually the precursor to the implementation of using e-wallet for this subsidy rationalisation to get the people to familiarize with the use of e-wallet transaction. And this is the um, initiative or measures are taken by the government to not introduce something that will make things complicated for the public to understand and to utilize. But of course, this is going to be huge because imagine millions of transaction to be conducted on daily basis, and we do not talk yet about the capacity to handle such a huge amount of bandwidth or data transfer. So when talking about the challenges, um, it takes time to prepare for it, and that's why even though government has been talking about it for a while, but the implementation is going to be next year, mid next year, so that all these potential risks can be addressed properly.
Dr. Razman, are you concerned that if, in fact, the government does opt for e-wallets, they've been trying that out in the budget 2025, are you concerned that could be a digital divide between those who may not be online in terms of e-wallets?
I think that's why they also provided the option of using IC, because
Okay.
at the rural area, there might be, maybe they have the device, but the internet, the connectivity, connection might not be just strong enough to facilitate the transaction. So, but again, there could be a possibility challenges with using IC because in fact I experience myself. I sometimes cannot use the IC for transaction because they cannot read the chip. So this is something that again simulation is a good thing, but we cannot cover all the possibilities. So when talking about the digital divide, that's exactly what the government trying to do by using the mechanism of IC. But of course, we started to hear some people talking about what if somebody else using somebody else's IC. I mean, passing around the IC. Let's say I do not have car, but I have IC, but I'm eligible. I might rent out my IC for those who have cars but not eligible. So all these things could also happen, and so I'm not worried whether the rural people had to use IC or the urban use e-wallet, but I'm more worried about people taking advantage of, because one system is but a bit secure, the e-wallet, but I see itself, it might be potential for abuse there.
Right. Are there any lessons that we can learn from the diesel subsidy reform that was rolled out last June?
I think some of the main lesson we can learn from that diesel's subsidy rollout last June is that apparently there's not enough information coming out from the government to counter the rumors and lies spread by some irresponsible parties. So somehow the government is not quick enough or savvy enough to dispel this rumor and maybe fake news. So this time I think government needs to consider this strategy where lots and lots of information need to be given out before the implementation, during implementation, and not necessarily through the official media, like the official newspaper or news, but through alternative media as well, like the social media platform. We have seen in the recent, I think, US presidential election that somehow the outcome might be decided by those who follow social media more than the official news. So same thing could be utilized, same strategy could be utilized by the government, utilizing all the social media platform so that the information can be there quickly to address any concern when we roll out this petrol rationalisation subsidy.
And there are, of course, concerns that once the subsidies, the RON 95 subsidies are rationalized, there could be negative impacts, particularly inflationary risks. Are you concerned about that? And what would you like to see the government do to address or to limit the potential negative impacts?
Um, Government has given the assurance during the presentation of budget 2025 that majority will continue to receive subsidy. I think about only 15% going to be no longer eligible for such subsidy, and therefore the impact on the inflation rate itself might not be that significant. As we can see, even in that budget speech, the government already predicted for next year inflation rate going to be slightly higher than this year, but it's not going to be that high. And this projection already taken into the situation or the upcoming implementation of this rationalization. So it means that the government already prepared for it, already anticipated. There might be some increase in inflation rate, but it's not going to be uh, really high. And uh, and of course, the continuing initiative or mechanism of price control for main product or services will continue. So I do not foresee there will be major impact on the inflation rate next year.
Dr. Razman, thank you so much for being on the show with me today. That was Dr. Razman Latiff from Putra Business School. We're going to take a quick break here on Consider This. We'll be back with more. Stay tuned. Hi, welcome back to Consider This. I'm Melisa Idris. Let's continue our conversation about the rationalisation of RON 95 petrol subsidies, which is set to be rolled out by middle of next year. So joining us now is Dr. Elya Nabila Abdul Bahri, who's a senior lecturer in the Department of Economics under the Faculty of Business and Economics at Universiti Malaya. Dr. Elya, thank you for being on the show with me today. I'm hoping we can begin our conversation maybe with you looking at what challenges you see in terms of ensuring that the criteria for the RON 95 subsidies are applied equitably across the diverse demographics of Malaysia.
Okay, Melisa, So we know that the targeted subsidies should be given to the person in need. So we have to identify the criteria. As for now, we just looking at the income as a criteria to give to the person in needs. For example, usually we only focus on B40 as individuals. Somehow it's really subjective to define who are in need. Uh, to ensure that we have to ensure that we identify the right criteria. Okay, for example, in our society we have individuals, and we also have like micro entrepreneurs. Okay, maybe they may earn net income at the borderline B40 and M40, and for example after minus their worker salary, shop rent, machine rent, and it could be impacting for those who are relying on, for example, on the transportation to deliver the products, or who doing online business, for example, that have a high reliance on the mobility of vehicles, okay, that use around 95. And those entrepreneurs who are really depends on the transportation for delivery, especially who are doing online business. uh, and if the targeted subsidy, so the cost of transportation may rise for those who are maybe just get above income, above the B40, for example, and maybe who will pay the cost. You worry about they will be transferred to the customer due to the price change. And another is about the person who earn income above the B40, but they challenge. Also, we have to look into the to earn the money is also the matters. Okay, for example, we know that the higher the income, the higher the risk. Okay, it could be more challenge, more stress as compared to B40. Maybe it doesn't mean that this targeted subsidy maybe is figured to make everyone's happy, right? So the such terminology like B40, M40, and T20 is not accurate, as it is not take into account the cost of living, urban and rural, and how frequent they use Route 95 to commute from home to workplace. And we have to look into that parts, that criteria. Somehow, if we give the subsidy to B40, for example, but they just work at the nearby the house, as compared to maybe M40, but they have to commute maybe 50 kilometers, okay, and maybe the transportation cost is maybe is above 500 per month. So it will be who will suffers most. So we have to, yeah, that's a challenge. And also in terms of implementation as well, whether some others look into whether the rebates, it could be to the income tax, but I think it should not be, because for those who are B40, they are not eligible to pay income tax. Okay, especially for those who have earn income 3,100. And whether if we give them just a coupon, maybe it's misused, for example. So maybe we have to look into the number of liters. So how to determine it? So
Yeah, it
is
sounds.
it during the point of use, or how? So this is very challenges on implementation as well, and defining who are eligible to receive it.
Yeah,
That's a
it
challenge.
sounds really complex. This process of determining who is eligible for the subsidies. I'm just wondering about if there is, the unintended consequences of a subsidy cliff. So, for instance, families who are just slightly above that cutoff point, right? The eligibility threshold. Might there be this problem that there could be a whole segment of families or societies that might be disproportionately burdened financially because they don't make the subsidy cut?
Yeah, so that's also an issue. So I give you some example. If the person who are, let's say M40, which is above P40, for example, let's say they earn 3,200, they are entitled to pay the income tax. Okay, then they're not receiving subsidy. They pay tax, and they commute from home to work. Maybe let's say 30 kilometers, for example, because usually for those B40, for example, they will not commute to to far distance if just to get, for example, income or salary 2,000. So they usually will work in nearby. Maybe that subsidy is not being utilized, for example. Okay, and for those who are M40, which is above, it's just above the threshold. they have to commute maybe or high reliance or dependency on Rule 95, and their traveling cost is maybe above 500 a month, and including stress and worse work-life balance, who would be more suffer than B40. So the criteria is not looking at the one layer. Okay, we have to look into another things also, the degree of dependency of using Rule 95, and as well as how many members, total numbers of members in household. Okay, so because we also have to look into uh, the uh, the income per capita for the each member of household, not only as a whole household. Okay, so we have to deep dive about that criteria. So so we have to but the information, okay, the information we need, like for example compile all the information. Previously we have PADU, but there is no information, for example, on the high degree of the reliance of Rule 95, for example, and they have the information on the number of members, but we have to include, or maybe we have to rebranding for another system of for data collection. I'm not sure. So that is the information should be up to date. For example, the additional of the member of household, for example, and maybe the changes. For example, they need to commute long distance, or maybe they change to short distance. So the data should be updated. So that's also the challenge, and this is we need to identify. So usually they use this to commute from home to the workplace. So and most of them, uh, rather than they are receiving subsidy, but we also look into the contribution. Okay, for example, as a taxpayers as well. So if we can look into the just income inequality, we just looking at the income, okay, the difference of income, but we not calculate or include how much tax they pay, okay, how much the cost of living, maybe they live in urban as compared to rural. So we have to look at the different angle. Maybe we have to reformulate on how we identify the criteria for those who should receive this subsidy. Okay, so somehow, for example, those B40, for example, elementary workers, some of them, when they commute from home to work, somehow they just go to work by transportation that provided by the company, and somehow is the subsidy also not being utilized. So and also there's the issue of the borderline, the earners, income earners at the borderline. So we have to relook back on these criteria, and we have to redefine the meaning of the who are in need.
Right. So all of this is really important in the lead up to the rollout of the subsidy rationalisation. I do want to ask you, Dr. Elya, what it is that you would like to see the government prioritise, not just in terms of getting the definitions and the categories right, but also in terms of communicating the implementation of this to the public, to businesses. What would you like to see happen from now until middle of next year?
Okay, so what it should be, it should be have to look to make this targeted subsidy makes everyone's happy. Okay, for those who are receive the subsidy, and as well as for those who are not receiving the subsidy but contributing, okay, to the country as a taxpayers, for example. So I think it should be first we have to identify the right information, okay, the right information on how it's been, how the criteria is, and how it's been identified. It should be transparent, okay, and of course we have a conversation, we have an argument to redefine who those who should receive the subsidy, and we also identify who not receive the subsidy. But at least we should can say stop arguing, because we don't want to at the end this targeted subsidy is become regressive and not progressive, because the targeted subsidy we want to like what's returned to us, okay, what returned to the country, to make sure that there is a progressive or productive return and not is a regressive return. For example, for those who are pay tax more, they are demotivated, for example. So we don't want that the side effect that's creating another bad effect. So we should have transparent information between government and also the people, okay, to the society, and also we also highlight um, what what the expected outcome from the government, okay, to the people, whether for the well, is it about the welfare or how to harmonize or to reducing the gap between different level of income, and to make sure that this is harmonized solutions and not as conflicting solutions. Yeah.
Definitely true. Dr. Elya, thank you for being on the show with me today. I appreciate your time. That was Dr. Elya Nabila Abdul Bahri from Universiti Malaya, wrapping up this episode of Consider This. I'm Melisa Idris, signing off for the evening. Thank you so much for watching. Good night.